As seen in previous decades, media has had the power to influence our perceptions, whether to portray events and people in a positive light or in a negative light. We often view the 1980s in particular as a time of great social and political change in American history. On the surface, this is partly true. After all, the 1980s was filled with technological innovations and the rise of popular culture.
Big hair, big money, big foreign policy change, big groundbreaking technology.
Video killed the radio star. Video killed the radio star.
The 80s saw America become a greater superpower with all the spoils that go with it. Early in the decade, cable television services became an affordable option for many Americans. A number of specialty channels premiered that vastly affected the country.
This is it. Welcome to MTV Music Television, the world's first 24-hour stereo video music channel.
However, upon closer inspection, the 1980s was also a turbulent time for many Americans. A non-native New Yorker looking at neighborhoods like Washington Heights today may find it hard to believe that these places were once the drug capitals of New York. Through the 80s and 90s, drugs became more widely available and abused as drug trafficking rose in intensity. A veritable crack cocaine epidemic made the streets dangerous to residents and bystanders, so dangerous that the NYPD had to come up with new strategies to reduce the outrageous crime rates. One crime, the Central Park jogger case in particular, rocked the inhabitants of New York City and twisted their perceptions of racial minorities, giving these minorities a bad reputation for decades to come.
New York in the late 1980s was a completely schizophrenic, divided city.
New York's now the capital of racial violence.
Not to be afraid.
Off with the camera, man!
Last night, a woman jogger was found unconscious and partially clothed in Central Park. She was beaten and sexually assaulted.
5 young men were arrested for the attack. And on the 28-year-old investment banker in the park, they were accused of raping her and severely beating her and leaving her for dead in the bushes. The teenagers, 4 blacks and 1 Hispanic, were 14, 15, and 16 years old. They did not know each other. They were described as a pack of wild animals. A new term was created, wilding. The mayor at the time called it the crime of the century. Many people thought this case had 1 victim. The truth is, there are 6 victims in this story. And today, we need to take a new look at the conduct of police in this case, especially the way tough, seasoned detectives interrogated 5 teenagers, some for more than 24 hours with no lawyers present.
It's the most infamous murder case in Kansas history. November 1959, the family goes to bed for the evening, only to be murdered in cold blood.
At the time, if there was such a thing as almost a perfect crime, those guys almost did it.
Even though in cold blood the media or the author Truman Capote was visibly biased in favor of Perry Smith, the reality was that he was responsible for the deaths of 4 innocent people. Likewise, in the Central Park 5 case, the accused were placed in a derogatory light on radio, television, and especially newspapers, while in truth they were not even the true perpetrators. These 2 cases show that the media has a polarizing effect, the power to turn the audience's beliefs against or for an event or person. In Cold Blood, the power of media can be seen through the words of Truman Capote. Although as a journalist, Capote was obligated to remain impartial, instead his affections towards Perry overshadowed the truth. He was partly responsible for the slaughtering of 4 people in cold blood. By drawing on his interviews and research of the Clutters case, Capote attempts to make his readers understand the reasons why Perry might have committed those murders. He emphasizes Perry's terrible, unfortunate childhood with the separation of his parents, an alcoholic mother, abusive nuns, and his family's history of suicide. However, through his attempt to humanize Perry, he neglects to show the gravity of the crime committed and the lack of remorse and morality in Perry. In reality, Perry was the man who used a Savage shotgun Model 300 to gun down the Clutter family who supposedly had money in a safe. Ultimately, the cost of the 4 lives was merely $40. In the Central Park jogger case, media in the form of television and newspapers vilified these 5 teenagers who were merely at the wrong place at the wrong time. Without even any justifiable evidence to incarcerate these supposed rapists, the NYPD or the New York Police Department readily perceived them as guilty. The reason being that the victim herself was a white, middle-class woman. In a culture embedded with racial stereotyping, these police officers did not even have the sense to think twice of their verdict because they were so ingrained in their prejudice against racial minorities.